Hey all, this is Drew here from UpTech. Wanted to just give you a quick intro to a tool that we built and kind of how we manage Git change logs now. We used to manage Git change logs by just having a changelog.md file at the root of all of our projects. And then every time we would make a pull request or make a change, we would also update an entry in the top of the changelog file under a section called unreleased. And this worked really well for us. This really aids the person who's doing the releasing when it comes time to cut a release of either the library or the application. And that's why we did it. However, there are some drawbacks to having a changelog.markdown file in your actual repo and making updates to it on a regular basis with every change. The most common issue, and probably the biggest issue with doing this workflow, is that you run into conflicts between people's branches, strictly just between the changes within the changelog.md file itself. So even if the code doesn't actually have conflicts, the branch will identify as having a conflict just with the changelog.md file. This can be really annoying, and it breaks the flow of development quite a bit when you have a team of multiple people making changes to the same code base. So we've come up with a solution to eliminate these conflicts and still abide by the principles and values that we identify in changelogs. And those other two principles are that the audience of the changelog is different than the audience of your commit messages. We believe strongly that commit messages are super valuable and super important, and that the content inside of those commit messages should be targeted and focused on the developers of the project. So it should have information about the context and what changes were made, why they were made, and how they were made, right? And so we do not want to, follow suit with tools that we've seen out there that just grab all of your Git commit summaries and paste those effectively into a changelog, because we feel like those summaries are intended for the developers and not intended for the consumers of the library or the consumers of the application. So we have come up with this other solution to deal with that. We also want to make sure that the release process is the same, irrespective of whether you're using our tool or not. So, and the way we do that is that we use git tags, just like we always have, irrespective of a changelog tool, to identify different releases. So, git-cl, as you probably figured by now, is a command line tool, and it's an extension on top of Git. So we can just do git space cl and treat it like a subcommand of Git. But its job is to facilitate, performing all of these following functions. So for instance, it has its own subcommand of git-cl unreleased, which will give us a snippet of the changelog entries for all the unreleased commits. If we want to see the actual commits instead of the changelog entries, we can throw the tac commits switch on there, and it'll show us that. We could also see what the most recent release was by doing git-cl latest, and that'll give us the changelog entries in markdown snippet for that. And if we throw the tac commits onto that, it will show us the commits for that. Now we also provide this full subcommand, which generates the full markdown changelog file based on the keep a changelog format. And it's useful for automating publishing or doing a historical review of the project. But the common use case is tying it into your CI process to generate the full-blown changelog.md and publishing that somewhere. You can also use it like in a manual process if you don't have CI set up and you want to generate it after every release. For example, that's what we're currently doing inside of this git-cl command line right now, is we are using it and just manually generating it and committing that generated markdown file to the repo after every release. And we still avoid the conflicts because we don't have multiple developers doing it at the same time. And now we also provide a released command. If you're interested in a particular release, then you can run git-cl space released and give it the version ID or the tag of the version, and it will give you the changelog entries for that specific version. You can also get the commits associated with that by doing the tac commit switch. So this is the command line tool, and now we'll talk about like how does it actually accomplish this. Well, each commit message, when you make a commit and you're following this process in this tool, you have the option to, in your git commit message, add towards the end this changelog heading, which is just a square bracket with the word changelog, all lowercase, close square bracket. And then underneath that, each line can be an entry in your changelog. And there's different categories of changes. For example, there's added, changed, deprecated, removed, fixed, security. These are standardized within the keep a changelog format, which is what we follow. So if you're interested, you can go to keepachangelog.com. You can check out the standardized format. This is the same markdown format that we produce, including the linking at the bottom so you can see the diffs. But they also standardize and formalize the added, changed, deprecated, removed, fixed, and security categorizations. They also do unreleased the same way that we do, which is they keep an unreleased section at the top of the markdown file, similar to how I described we used to do in the past. So now that you understand that, we can give you an example of some of those. Let's look at the git-cl repo, for example. If we look at the history in the Git tree, we can see up here, if we walk backwards from the commits, we have fixed a small typo in the README. Now you'll note this commit message does not have a changelog entry. And you don't have to put one in every commit. It's only when it makes sense, right? So here's another one where we added specific mention of pre-release support in the README. And this one also does not have a changelog entry. This one, we regenerated the changelog markdown since we just released version 3.2.0. That one also does not have a changelog entry. We then have a bump version to v3.2.0, and all we do is bump the version in the code base to that as we've tagged a release, and then we get tagged it with v3.2.0. Now again, no changelog entry. Now if we go to the next commit below that a commit that is included in that v3.2.0, we'll notice that it has a changelog heading. It has a category of changed followed by a colon immediately, and then the line describing what that change was. So we changed the markdown changelog entry categories to be sorted alphabetically in this one. And then we still have the value for the developer. We still have the details and context for the developers here, while also having the changelog details here, which are targeted at the consumer audience. If we keep going, you'll see another one. So we have a changelog heading in this commit message with fixed. So in this, we fixed an incorrect unreleased header link in the full and unreleased subcommands. And then we have another commit here where we regenerated changelog that doesn't affect the changelog entries at all. And then we have another release here, which also doesn't have a changelog entries at all. And then we have another commit before that that includes a changelog where we fixed a bug where hotfix releases would be missed. And we fixed a bug where merged release branches could cause incorrect changelog entries. So you get the gist. Like, all you have to do is create this little header and then throw in a list of your entries identified by category. And if you do that, then you can use git-cl effectively. You can do git-cl, and you could do full, and we could have it redirect. By default, full outputs the standard out, and you can redirect that to a file like changelog.md. And then once you do that, you can look at that file. Let's look at that in the markdown viewer. So you can see this is what the file looks like. It's got most recent to oldest at the bottom. and we have an unreleased section at the top. Right now we don't have any unreleased changes with changelog entries, so there's nothing there. Then we have v320, which has changed and fixed 2 entries. Then we have 312, which has the other ones that we looked at, and so on and so forth. And we have the linking support. So if we were to, for example, go to this link, you can see it loads up, shows us all the commits in that link, and actually shows us a diff of all the code changes that were included in that release. So yeah, so this is the standard keep a changelog format, and it's automatically generated by looking at the Git tree and pulling those values out. Now, one thing that's important to realize is you could be wondering how we identify releases. And it's fairly simple. We look at all of the tags in the repository, and any tag that matches the following pattern, where it matches semantic versioning basically, where it has a V prefix or doesn't, and it follows X, Y, Z, where those are collections of digits in each. It identifies those as releases, and then goes backward, walking down the tree from each of those points until it gets to a previous release. And it collects the commits along those paths, and it collects the changelog entries along those paths as well to figure out what belongs in which version. If you use pre-release builds in your team, we support that as well. You just have to use the -p switch or the --pre switch to instruct git-cl to include pre-releases as well when it's generating things. So let's look at some examples real quick just so you can see. So let's say, if I was about to release a new version of this, what I would probably be doing is first I'd be wanting to review what was unreleased. So I'd be doing git-cl unreleased. Now right now we don't have any unreleased changes, but we could also, in addition to the changelog entries, we could also look at the commits, and we could see, oh, we actually do have, these commits that are included in unreleased. So these are technically part of this release, even though they don't have any changelog entries. So that's useful to know as well. The other thing that's useful to know when you're prepping a release is you might want to know what the previous release version was so that you could appropriately bump the version in your release. And an easy way to do that is just run git-cl latest. Git-cl latest will dump the markdown snippet for that latest release. In this case, it was version 320, which was released on 2020 on 05/01. So this tells me right here what the latest version was. So if I'm releasing a patch version, I would know I want to bump it to 321 because the one before it was 320. Also, I can do the commits switch in here to figure out what commits are part of that release. And as I showed you before, we have git-cl full, which generates the entire markdown changelog for all of time. And then, of course, we have git-cl released if you, for some reason, want to look at a particular release. So let's say we want to go back in time and see what was included in release v1.0.0. We can do that. Or if we want to see the commits that are included in that, it's as simple as that. And that is kind of the gist. Now, in terms of like workflow or best practices related to adoption, it's obviously easiest to adopt this if you don't have a changelog already and you just want to start tracking one, or if it's a greenfield project, you can just start using git-cl. If you've already been tracking a changelog and you're okay with, letting all of the old changelog go and you don't care about it, then just start using git-cl and it's not a problem. If you do care about the history of your changelog and you want to keep maintaining it, our recommendation is still to switch over to git-cl. But instead of using git-cl full to generate the entire thing, our recommendation is that when you are prepping a release, to use git-cl unreleased. generate the snippet and copy and paste the snippet into your manually managed changelog markdown.md file whenever you're bumping a release. This will still mitigate and eliminate the conflicts between people changing the changelog markdown file, so you'll still get that benefit. You'll still have the benefit of it being targeted for your audience. You'll still have the benefit of it being identified releases with tags, and you have the benefits of having it tightly coupled to the code as well. So we still recommend that path, even if you want to manually maintain your old existing changelog file. So with that, I hope you enjoy, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions.